Monsters have been the face of our irrational fears and captured our imaginations since the beginning of civilization. Like our fears, they come in all shapes and sizes and meet us in our nightmares. They can be physical manifestations of evil, serve as metaphors that reflect our current anxieties, or they can be cautionary tales about the consequences of man's meddling with the natural order. Movies have been the perfect medium to explore the darker corners of our minds and help create the iconic representations that we will forever associate with these movie monsters. This is part 2 of the Zombies episode of Movie Monsters, where we're going to cover the genre from the 90s to present day. If you want to check out part 1, then just look in the description where I'll post a link. But we have a ton of fat to choose, so let's dig in. By the 90s, it looked like zombies were pretty much undead and buried, but despite the thinning horde, a few have definitely earned a mention. Tom Savini, who previously worked with Romero on Dawn of the Dead, decided to reanimate a classic with his 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead. The movie stars Tony Todd, the actor that would go on to portray Candyman.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
It's a really faithful remake that follows the original movie beat for beat. But this time around, it's shot in color and has some really impressive gore. Despite its utter lack of originality, Night of the Living Dead gave Tom Savini a chance to showcase his skills as one of the true pioneers of special effects. In 1992, Peter Jackson was not a household name. He'd only directed a few films that were barely seen outside of New Zealand for pretty obvious reasons. Braindead, aka Dead Alive, is the story of a man struggling to adjust to his new life as a zombie babysitter after his mom is bitten by the dreaded Sumatran rat monkey. It's a disgustingly fun movie that you really shouldn't take seriously. Dead Alive's VHS box reads, the goriest fright film of all time.
Party's over.
I mean, I wasn't there to measure the Blood Raven Blade, or the blood rain in the Evil Dead remake, or the river of blood that poured out of the elevators in The Shining, but Dead Alive definitely aspires to be repulsive and vile. It still blows my mind that this is the guy that went on to direct the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The new millennium had dawned, and with it a zombie renaissance, and it was this next film that helped it claw its way out of the grave. Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later is a low-budget, gritty, and visceral movie that's proven to be one of the most influential in the genre. In it, a man played by Cillian Murphy wakes up in a hospital to find that the world around him has crumbled. Sound familiar? Like I said, influential. It was one of the first movies to modify the monsters by explaining that the outbreak was caused by a virus, making them seem more human and harder to distinguish. This is compounded by the fact that even the survivors are doing monstrous shit. Who can you really trust in a world without law and order? Not the TV show. 2002 brought us a second movie about zombie virus outbreaks. Resident Evil, the piece of shit that shat out a half dozen other pieces of shit, each slightly more foul-smelling than the last. The Resident Evil series is something about an umbrella, some clones, and of course there's zombies in it, and then Mr. Smith shows up, and I don't really remember. It's all ludicrous. If you're in the mood to watch some dumb B-movie fun, check out any of the Resident Evil movies and take a shot every time something happens in slow-mo. I think we can move on. Zack Snyder, the name synonymous with quality, directed Dawn of the Dead, and it's actually one of the rare remakes that doesn't suck. I mean, it's by no means all that good, but it's a fun ride. I mean, except for the accident. Like any good remake, it borrows the premise from its predecessor, but it brings new ideas. The scenes with the zombie baby and the celebrity lookalike target practice are both fantastic. Simon Pegg plays Sean, a slouch of an electronics salesman who wakes up and slowly, hilariously slowly, realizes that there's been a zombie outbreak. This movie works on almost every level. It's a funny parody, a sweet buddy movie and romantic comedy, a scary zombie movie, and a touching story about loss and grief. Does that cover it? George Romero himself was so impressed with Sean that he gave Pegg and Wright a cameo in Land of the Dead. What do you get when you cross Day of the Dead and Lassie? You get 2006's Fido, the story of a boy and his dog, only instead of a dog, it's a zombie. Fido takes place in an alternate 1950s where zombies have been made into household pets or servants, like the dinosaurs in the Flintstones opening. When Fido breaks free from his collar one day, he bites a neighbor and gets put in the pound, and it's up to Timmy to rescue him. For real, this movie is super silly and it's pretty damn great too. In 2007, Record was released. This Spanish-language found-footage zombie flick centers around a journalist and cameraman that are quarantined inside a housing complex in the midst of a full-on zombie outbreak. Found-footage movies aren't for everyone, I get it. Personally, I like the immersion though, and I think it makes the experience more real. And this movie is seriously nerve-wracking at times. And if you happen to be too dense to read subtitles, then just go ahead and watch the 2008 American remake Quarantine, because it isn't that bad either. 2007 brought us 28 weeks later. Military bases have been built to protect and house all of the survivors, but the horror happens when the rage virus starts to spread from inside the camp. 28 weeks later backs up a little bit to see the bigger picture. It introduces us to more characters, and it also introduces us to the implications of what the rage virus would have on society as a whole. Some of the moves that the military has to make in this movie are really shocking, but under the circumstance, it was ultimately probably the right decision. But it will leave you questioning these moral quandaries, and revisiting it reminded me how much I actually dig this one. Maybe it's not better than the first, but it's definitely a worthy follow-up. When I saw the trailer for 2009 Zombieland, the first thing that crossed my mind was, this is gonna be a Shaun of the Dead ripoff. It isn't.
Time to nut up or shut up. Fuck this clown.
Zombieland stars Jesse Eisenberg as a nervous, twitchy Jesse Eisenberg type who has managed to survive with a very concise list on how not to get eaten. He sets off to see if his family has survived in Columbus, Ohio, when he meets Woody Harrelson's character, a motherfucking Twinkie-loving fellow Floridian badass that goes by Tallahassee, which is his destination. The two set off, and along their journey they cross two skilled con artists slayed by Emma Stone and Abigail Breslin. If the scene at the end in the fair doesn't tickle your geek spot, then you may not have a pulse. Besides, Bill fucking Murray. On Halloween night in 2010, The Dead Would Rise. The Walking Dead was released on AMC. It's based on a hugely popular comic written by Robert Kirkman. The show was an overnight success and spawned hordes of zombie fans like never before, but alas, it's a TV show, and that's a topic for another video. Audiences' expectations of the genre have changed. Could 2013's PG-13 World War Z satiate the bloodlust of its viewers? It stars Brad Pitt as a member of the UN who has to protect his family and find a cure for zombieism. The violence in this movie is tense and realistic, but the camera cuts away just before the zombies start ripping into flesh. There's a scene when they're boarding a plane in it that is really suspenseful and well done. I mean, would it have been better if it were rated R? Yeah, probably, but this movie's still entertaining and the cast is first rate, the budget's huge, and the story's pretty original. And as a quick update, it looks like David Fincher is going to be re-teaming with Brad Pitt for the sequel, so that could be pretty amazing. Part Snowpiercer, part World War Z, Train to Busan is the story of a workaholic father reluctantly taking his daughter to visit her mother in Busan for her birthday. They take the train, and lo and behold, there's a fucking zombie outbreak. The zombies in this movie turn quickly and move quickly, and they plow down the aisles of this train like a flood, very similar to the ones in World War Z. The father has to step up if the two of them are gonna make it out alive. It's clever, gory, funny, and scary, and there's an emotional connection to the characters, which is not typical in the genre. If you're into zombie movies, hurry out now and take the train to Busan. Obviously, this is just a brief look at the timeline of the history of zombie movies. There is no way to discuss the literally thousands that have been made over time, but hopefully this will help you maybe find some major milestones and offer you a little bit of insight into the evolution. If you have seen all the movies on this list, what are some that should have been included and which ones should have been cut to replace them? On the next video, I'm thinking of doing another episode of werewolves or vampires, so be sure to cast your vote below. And if you enjoyed this video, click the like button. And if you want to catch this entire series, just subscribe to the channel and enable notifications. That way you'll know when the new episodes drop. Also, be sure to leave me your social security number and bank routing information down in the comments section. Until next time, I'm Jeremy on behalf of Be Terrible, signing off.